Welcome back to another episode of Free the Plant, Free the People, presented by BluRok Farms. You know me, I'm LeVar, the host, as well as the CEO and founder of BluRok Farms, where this podcast, we talk about everything cannabis related. We have a very, very special episode today. I'm not going to quite get into the topic yet. I want to first introduce our special guest. We have George Schroeder, who is an ACE certified personal trainer, as well as a fitness nutrition specialist. Excuse me, that word always gets me. I knew it was gonna do it, but it got me. And anyways, as well, and I wanna say for this particular podcast, the most important aspect of his background is that he's a master of public health. He is a master of public health. So I think he's gonna be, if that didn't give away what the topic is, I don't know what will. But again, thank you for coming on to the podcast. I appreciate it.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So some of you guys might have guessed that today's topic is going to be a very interesting one, and based on the timing, it might be fitting. So we're going to be talking about cannabis and sports. There's been a lot of news coming in the last couple of years about cannabis, its deschedulization from federal standing. And that, I believe, is what really is pushing this acceptance into more sports-related topics. I don't know that for a fact, but I find it that the timing of those two events gives me some indication that there is a correlation to that happening. So
yeah, thanks. That's a good introduction. You know, I did some research to prepare for this talk today, and you know what became very clear to me was that the World Anti-Doping Agency, right? Cannabis is the third most commonly found substance in elite athletes, after steroids for muscle growth, right? And stimulants, right? There's cannabis, okay? Now, there are tons of studies that show, for example, how steroids increase muscle growth and how that's an unfair advantage, and that's why it's banned, right? But there's very few studies that would say that cannabis enhances athletic performance. In fact, I found one study just, you know, in my recent literature review that basically looked at cannabis in college athletes, and it showed that it did not allow them to, you know, lift more weight, right? It did not make them faster on the track, right? It didn't make them leap higher in the pole vault, right? Yet these elite athletes are using cannabis, widely used, the third most found substance, right? So why?
Yeah,
that's, you know,
right? That's the question that a lot of people want to know and understand. But before we get into that, I want to, if you can give just a little bit more information about you and your journey into fitness and and especially you know, public health.
Sure. So well, you know, fitness coaching and public health and just all of the things that I've done in my career prior to these things, you know, are basically service oriented. It's you know, I've lived a service oriented career.
Gotcha.
Right. So, you know, as a fitness coach, you know, I want to help people improve their fitness and improve their quality of life, right? So, you know, that's why I studied public health, so I could, you know, bring that, you know, I had a job in the public sector for many years. And I studied epidemiology, which is really it's the science of the linkage between cause and effect, right? So, you know, does this intervention improve this situation, right? Like, how do you get men to check their blood pressure more frequently, right? What if there was a nurse in the barber shop, right?
Make them more compliant,
Getting, you know, like helping people understand how to regulate blood pressure, right? So epidemiology kind of studies those social factors, right? So, you know, so I'm interested in the science, you know, and as I've experienced cannabis use as an amateur athlete, right? I'm an endurance athlete. I work out frequently. I do weight training.
Gotcha.
You know, I work with amateur clients. You know, none of my clients are elite athletes, right? You know, but in my own personal journey in fitness and in cannabis, I've discovered that, you know, as many thousands of people have known before me, that, you know, cannabis can help you relax your mind, energize your body, right, and prepare you for a bout of exercise.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's really why you find all of these elite athletes, right? And I want to mention a few names here, like if you think about Arnold Schwarzenegger, right, the great world-class athlete, bodybuilder of the 1970s, won 6 world titles, right? Now he will
Olympia,
say he will say today that he's didn't use it very much, and because all of his because I think he kind of subscribes to all of the stereotypes around it, right?
Yeah, the stigma, and he doesn't want that to be tied to his celebrity, because at this point in his career, he's a brand.
Right.
Anything can hurt that brand. He
That's correct.
kind of want to associate with, which would make it makes sense, but you would hope that he would want to stand behind something that he knows has some benefits in his career.
So he kind of walked away from that, right? And then, the Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps a few years ago, he, was on camera. Somebody took a
video of
some
him
kind of a video of
with
him,
a gas mask,
all of that, And I'm like, okay, so here you have these elite, world-class athletes using cannabis, and it doesn't prevent them from being a world-class athlete, right?
Michael Phelps has the most gold medals out of any Olympic swimmer.
So I think, as just I kind of translate my personal experience into kind of what I see happening in the world. I go, well, gosh, it relaxes the mind. It increases my mind-body connection. And I hope we have a chance to talk about the importance of that.
Yeah, we definitely will.
As we get into like trauma-informed coaching, right? So, I use cannabis like in a very disciplined, kind of planned way,
where with intention.
I go into it, with gratitude that I have this plant that has been cultivated for thousands of years, that now is legal, and I won't get in trouble for having it with me, right? I won't get in trouble for buying it. I can know what I'm buying.
Yeah, that too, because of the testing, the vigorous testing that is done.
Yeah, so I know if I'm going to go into a 2 to 3 hour bout of distance running, right? If I have a small amount of a very mild strain of cannabis prior to that, I can just stretch, I can do my exercise, I can cool down, and by the time I'm ready to drive a car again, I'm good.
You're good,
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so that's that's been my experience, but I think there's a huge stigma associated with it, right? Like, why was Brittany Griner incarcerated in Russia?
Yep.
Well, there was a lot of political reasons behind it, but the justification was she has this banned substance. She has this illegal thing, right?
And Shakira Richardson was dropped from the Olympic team because of marijuana use for the Olympics. And she's doing great now, recovering from that kind of setback.
Yes.
But imagine where she could have been if she had that added additional experience of that first Olympic run. Because experience is important as well in these areas.
Right. So people have been getting tripped up by their interest in cannabis for a long time, and unfairly so. And so overcoming the stigma of it, I think, as I enter into that space, I say, well, consider post-traumatic stress, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Now, if you look at the number of medical cannabis patients in New Mexico, it's around 100,000 now. And fully half of those are with a PTSD diagnosis, right? So that's a large cohort of people. And think of all the people who have similar symptoms to those 50,000, but just haven't considered cannabis as something to relieve those symptoms. They haven't, they don't like cannabis. Maybe they had a bad experience with it. It's not on their mind, maybe, right? Or they're really wrapped up in the whole war on drugs stigmatizing, which has happened for the last, you name it, 50 years, 80 years, right?
Since Ronald Reagan,
So,
actually even before that.
So, so overcoming that stigma is something that begins to happen for me personally within the medical space, right? I'm a medical cannabis user under a PTSD diagnosis. And just a quick word on, trauma, right? what's traumatic for one person may be trivial,
Yeah,
may be
yeah.
just an inconvenience.
It's a sliding scale. Yeah.
Right. So you can't really compare and say, oh well, you weren't a military veteran, therefore your trauma is insignificant.
Yeah.
Right.
No trauma compete offs. No. We're not having a trauma battle. And I agree with you. That is an area where it's harder to validate or confirm, because, like you said, who are you to say how someone interprets their trauma versus somebody else, their trauma, comparing the two.
Right. So I mean, but so our initial interest in cannabis, as being in the world of sports, is really you see all of these elite athletes using this, and then you go, well, it doesn't prevent them from being an elite athlete.
Exactly.
Now, there's really no science that shows that it improves performance.
Correct. Yeah.
But if you think about the stress
Recovery is more the key, I think.
that these folks are under, both mentally and physically, right? If they find that cannabis relieves that stress, it helps them recover for the next event, then why shouldn't they be allowed to use it, right? In fact, I mean, there really, I think, is very little science that would show that they've got a competitive advantage
I agree. Yep.
as a result of using it.
Exactly.
So it's therapeutic in that regard. So I kind of take that and I go, well, how does that apply to an amateur athlete? How does that apply to somebody who's trying to relieve their symptoms of trauma and stress, and move that into the local cannabis space in New Mexico, and go, how does that present opportunities for therapeutic use? How does that inform a business model, right? So that's kind of where my interest is.
Gotcha. And so one of the questions I wanted to kind of piggyback off, or kind of look at it from a different lens, is the statistics you talked about in regards to the PTS patients that are in the medical cannabis licensing, or to allow to purchase under the medical cannabis, even though you don't need it here in New Mexico because recreational use. But it does have some benefits in the regards of it allows you to have a tax-free product. So that is a benefit on that regard.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But when I looked, because I did the same kind of demographic look at other states that have legalized cannabis. And in other states, what I find, or what I notice, is that there's a high correlation of what is out of the conditions that are allowed to apply, and then what the majority happens to be. It tends to be one or two of the cases, insomnia or PTSD, is what I've seen anyways.
Right.
And some of the things is, I think some of those numbers are inflated. And what I mean by that is that some of those people are stating insomnia or PTSD because, one, is harder to prove, and it's easier to get the license. That, to me, it serves two issues with society. Is one, we shouldn't be demonizing or stigmatizing people to the effect where they feel that they need to lie about potential having PTSD or insomnia to get a card to inflate these numbers, and that is that difficult. So, because I would really want to see a real aggregate of data that would say exactly those that were diagnosed with PTSD versus those that are just applying for the card, and see what that correlation is, because I still think it's going to be relatively high.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, but having that distinction of weeding out those potential of just wanting to get in the discounts for the card, or whatever the other potential aspects of it. And what is your kind of thinking in regards to that?
I mean, I went in to my interview to try to obtain a medical cannabis card under PTSD after an episode which my wife observed in me, and she said, "My gosh, you have PTSD from that thing that happened long ago." And I was like, "Wow, it's like so clear now, right?"
Yeah.
So I simply went in and talked to the professional, about my personal experience, and I didn't have to document anything. I just told him a convincing story about an experience that had happened to me that I think was transmitting itself into my current life in a negative way.
Yeah.
Right? And he was like, "Wow, that's a compelling story. Okay, you'll have your medical cannabis card in 2 to 4 weeks. Boom, there you go. Pay the money, right?" So, I mean, at the time, it was before full legalization occurred, right? And I went into it just kind of like wanting to learn more, and I even was like, how does cannabis relieve the symptoms of PTSD? I mean, there's studies that would explain that, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to experience that for myself, and it's just really important to keep notes, because I went into, I smoked marijuana, right? I smoked pot in college, right? Not knowing where it was from,
How it was
not
grown,
knowing
what
who grew
pesticides,
it,
anything.
right?
Or even the THC potency.
Is it
You
going to
just-
be really strong? Is it going to be really weak? Is it going to make me freak out? Is it going to make me go to sleep? I don't know.
Russian
right?
roulette.
Kinda.
Yeah.
So under the current, medical and legal framework, it's a benefit because you can really kind of understand, and you can like start low, go slow,
Yep.
and really identify what works for you and what does not, right? And it's really important to take good notes. And if I could just mention a quick little thing, I just want to point out this gravity ledger, which I picked up at the Lucky Leaf Expo just here in Albuquerque.
A couple of weeks ago.
A few weeks ago,
September.
the person that designed this is named Bo Carver,
Okay.
and I met him at the expo. And this is just a really good place to organize your thoughts about different cannabis strains and how they affect you. And it's a good place to take notes and to make note of, like, was this a tincture? Was this an edible? Did I smoke this? Did I vaporize this?
Yeah, how you consumed it, how long the effects are.
All that.
These are some of the things that.
So this is just a really useful tool that
Yeah.
I've used, and that I just want to put out there and say, you can just look that up. It's just very helpful.
Yeah, so one of, for the viewers out there, if you go back to episode 2, actually, that's what I discussed about having a ledger or having some sort of notebook or binder that breaks down. And in that episode, I talked about how I used my binder for my mind's drawing a blank, the Cannabis Cup. Where you had the opportunity to purchase, I think it was like 23 or 24 different strains all at once from different producers, and then test it out. And so I went through my process of how I evaluated each strain, and you can use those same methods to be documented in a ledger like this as well. So that you can have an identified, especially, I would definitely recommend that for patients that are using it for medical purposes. Because that will, and I actually had a conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago who was telling me that they had some symptoms and they weren't sure what would work for them. And I said, well, the best way to do it, one is taking diligent notes, and then 2, being attuned to the smells that you're getting from the strain that you're providing. And she's like, well, what if I don't know what that strain is? Because I was giving out the actual terpenes like limonol, carafilene,
Pinene.
Limonene, myrcene,
Sure.
all those aspects.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I'm not sure what those are. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
with limonene, it's a lemon or a citrus smell. So if you're getting that, you can kind of you won't know exactly which terpene, but you can kind of get an idea. And then if you
Right.
know that gave you a positive effect,
Yes.
then when you go back to the dispensary, you can say, okay, what strains do you have that serve this, that has this
Yes.
terpene profile in it?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because I will gravitate toward a strain that has the terpenes that are known to be anti-inflammatory. Right. I'm almost 60 years old. Okay. Yet I'm still an athlete. I get out there, I run, I lift weights, I do active things outdoors. I shovel compost, I pull weeds in my yard, and I find there's an anti-inflammatory property to the cannabis I use, which kind of prevents me from having to use an over-the-counter drug, like a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, which has impacts on the liver and just other side effects.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a balance. You have to kind of find out, the right amount of the right thing at the right time. But I will definitely gravitate toward the anti-inflammatory terpenes, which to my knowledge are, pinene,
More the earthier.
caryophyllene,
Yeah, more the earthier.
myrcene.
For those out there,
Right.
the easier way to tell is if you don't know the terpenes personally like that, it's more the earthier terpene profiles that give you more that earth smell.
Yeah.
Like pinene, that comes the best plant that is more commonly known would be like pine cones.
Right.
They are high in pinene, and that's what gives that piney smell of pine sol. high in pinene. So those are things that you
Right.
that you commonly know that can give you that idea of if it has this kind of associated smell
Right.
with it,
Right.
it might have that terpene profile and it might have those medical benefits that you're speaking of.
And a lot of growers and purveyors of cannabis products will tell you what, what terpenes are prevalent in that strain.
Yeah, the terpene profile.
Right. So I mean, so that's really important. And just to again, sort of contrast my knowledge of cannabis, 35 years ago when I was in college, to now, it's like you had terpenes. I had no idea what that was, right?
Yeah.
But terpenes are the things that provide aroma and taste in the plant world, right?
Yeah,
So
they're not
cannabis
just
also
selective
has
to-
these,
Yeah.
right? And they're known to have these different properties, and it's just fascinating to me how indigenous knowledge and cultural knowledge for hundreds and even thousands of years has known this, right? But they weren't operating within this Western scientific model
Yeah.
where they're looking at stuff under a microscope and breaking things down in a laboratory, it wasn't necessary because intergenerational knowledge knew this is the plant for that ailment.
Yep.
This is the plant for that ailment. This is a sacred plant. This is a common plant, right?
Yeah.
All that stuff was known, and then the war on drugs erased it. And now we're in a place where we're coming back and going, let's recognize these things, right? Let's respect this history and really learn from it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing more potential acceptance in cannabis and sports. And I think we're going to end up seeing that navigate and matriculate through a lot of different areas outside of sports as well. So I want to kind of talk about the current state of cannabis and sports in what we're seeing today in today's society, because there is a large educational push into that space of cannabis, the entourage effect, terpenes, how they affect the body. And I wanted to get your input on what you think about the current state of cannabis and sports and how you see that affecting your training of amateur athletes as well, because a lot of the things that we see happen on the professional space, we see trickle down to the amateur space, like cryogenics and cryo freezing. We weren't seeing that very much in the amateur space, but you're seeing that pop up more and more of a way of recovery that was taken from the professionals. So we're going to see similar trends with cannabis as well.
Our ability to study and report the results of studies is now really strong because of the legality of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Although prohibition at the federal level still is a barrier, there's a lot of good research happening in substances that were previously banned. It's easier to get research protocols approved, and you can really begin to demonstrate that there's a large population of people that can benefit from something, right? So I think cold therapy, as you mentioned, that is something that was like this elite thing that now it's kind of coming down into sort of the mainstream practice. And there's more and more studies that show these are the circumstances under which this is useful, right?
Strict regulations of how it can have the benefits, because with anything in excess can be bad for you.
Oh,
Even
totally.
water in excess, you can die.
Yes.
Drowning yourself literally by drinking water too fast.
Yeah.
So, but we all know water is an essential bodily function that we have to have within us. So, developing those balances, I think, is important.
Oh, totally. But just as the use of cannabis kind of finds its way into the amateur athlete space, into the mainstream fitness space. I mean, in Albuquerque, we can already see places that are combining yoga with cannabis, right? I know of at least one business that's doing this.
Yeah, Urban Oasis has a
Yes,
cannabis
that's who
lounge.
I was thinking of.
Yeah, that black owned as well.
Yes, it
Dr.
is.
Nia Harris,
Yeah.
who is the owner
She's
of
a
that
pharmacist.
establishment.
I mean,
Yep.
look at her credentials, right? Amazing. So that's is she studying that scientifically? No, I'm not sure, right? But I think if you were to take a poll of people that have done yoga with cannabis and yoga without cannabis, and you ask some focused questions about it, I think you could begin to uncover what people see as the benefits to themselves, and then you can begin to generalize up there's a trend that people feel better, more mind-body connection is really a thing.
No, definitely.
And, how does that manifest in a person? And how does that help them regulate their own breathing and, regulate their their bodily processes, and their mental processes together.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, exercise is known to relieve, even without cannabis, right? Exercise, relieves stress. I mean, that's pretty well documented, right? Yep. It improves sleep, right? And stress relief and improved sleep, and improved appetite are all good for exercise, right? So, and then there's evidence that cannabis is good for sleep, right? Cannabis is good for appetite.
Appetite suppression as well as appetite enhancement.
Yes. So, so it's like, well, gosh, these things separately are beneficial in their own way. And then we look at, how to combine these things, right? How do you combine exercise and fitness in a way that maximizes the therapeutic benefit of it, in a disciplined approach, because I mean, how do you make this not just a bunch of old dudes getting high and going to the gym, right? Yeah. So there's a marketing aspect to this. It has to be disciplined. It has to be, it has to be respectable. It has to be based in fact.
Yeah, based in fact,
right?
With the right intentions of what the goal you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to go about doing that.
Yeah. So, it has to be based in fact, and let's not forget the intergenerational knowledge that comes forward that supports this, right? And now that science can go, there really is something to that. Wow, right? Yeah. So, what people have known for hundreds of thousands of years, now science is going, stamp
You're right.
of approval.
Yeah, you
right?
guys were right. You've been telling us for a long time, but we've now proved you were right.
Right.
I do want to touch on the aspect that you were talking about in regards to stress and sleep. That is important, not just in exercise, but I've been recently watching, I forgot the full name of it, but it's the Blue Lives, or about basically living
the Blue Zones.
The Blue Zones, yes.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about that. Right.
And a lot of that, and there's a lot of studies and research and articles coming out as a result of that show, and other studies coming out recently, but showing that just improvement of life, extending your longevity, extending your life expectancy, the two main things that are involved in that, decreasing the amount of stress that you accumulate, not necessarily because we live in the real world. Stress is going to come, but the ones that tend to live longer tend to manage that stress better than those that don't.
Totally.
And then sleep, getting the proper amount of sleep, and not just getting the proper amount of sleep, but getting the proper restful sleep, making sure you're hitting all of those sleep cycles, and being in them long enough to receive the true benefits of actually resting your mind, and creating that aspect of it. And so what you're saying fits into not just sports, but in life as a whole. Yeah. And if cannabis can be a vehicle for that, but again, it has to be used deleteriously, or not deleteriously, but diligently rather, that can be helpful in that process as well.
Yeah, one of the mainstream news outlets that I pay attention to recently just kind of came out with this blurb based on the Blue Zones, basically saying, one of the things found in the Blue Zones is that old folks are not grumpy. And I was like, okay.
That's helpful.
Note to self,
don't
stop
be grumpy.
being grumpy, right? And then you look at the use of cannabis in folks with post-traumatic stress, right? And it reduces their anger and their fear. Yep. Which are two things that make people grumpy.
Yep.
So, that's an interesting tie-in, right? And I know from my own cannabis use that it is really hard for me to be grumpy when I'm experiencing cannabis, right? It's really hard to be. It's not impossible.
Yeah, that's the benefit of it. One of the benefits, rather.
Right. So, so the Blue Zones, decreasing stress, improving sleep, improving diet, right?
Diet and community.
Being conscientious about what you eat, and when and how much, right? So,
all fits into health and exercise, which you are,
So without overthinking it, without overstating the case, really what I'm looking for is the right amount of the right thing at the right time. As natural as I can get. right? Sometimes I have a really bad tension headache or something. I'm going to take 500 milligrams of Tylenol, right? You know, but I don't want to have to rely on that, right? Why do I have the headache? You know, maybe the beer I drank last night was like too strong or something. You know what I mean?
Maybe you're dehydrated.
All that. So, you know, so just, you know, the right amount of the right thing at the right time, nutritionally, right? Physically, just, you know, so just looking for opportunities to bring exercise and cannabis into the same space with that therapeutic approach, I think is really what we're looking at.
No, I definitely agree. I think that's going to be the key. And I think the fact, especially when federalization hits and a lot of these stipulations and regulations there's still going to be a lot of stipulations and a lot of regulations on the uses of it. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be, but the federal stigmatization of it when it becomes federally legal, I think will help with the research process, and we'll be able to get to the point of determining, okay, 25 milligrams of linalool, which also is a terpene found in lavender, can reduce your stress by 10% during an hour period of ingesting, consuming, whatever that method is, but having those more refined determinations of where, like you said, how is this, like how much do I need to use to get me to this point? And again, everybody's going to be different because your endocannabinoid system is going to be different. Like a perfect example that I bring up often here is I love sativas. It really works well for me. It helps me focus, it helps me be energetic. A personal experience of me using cannabis with exercise is I smoke Jelly Bean, which is one of my favorite sativas. I smoke that before I work out. I usually do it about 30 minutes before I work out. I do my stretching, and then if I'm doing weightlifting, I'll do my weightlifting. And I notice that I'm more focused, and especially if I'm doing like isolated workouts, like I'm focusing on a specific part of my bicep with bicep curls.
Oh, sure.
I tend to be more focused on targeting that specific range when I'm on that specific strain than when I'm not.
You know, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because there is a study, and again, it's a small study amongst college athletes, so it doesn't really represent the people that I'm going to work with as a fitness coach necessarily. But basically what the study showed was that the group that thought about the muscle they were training actually experienced greater muscle growth than the group that did not think about the muscle, right? So they were encouraged to think about something else, to listen to some kind of a music, to listen to some, you know, right? And all other factors being the same, nutrition, training, sleep, etc., the people that actually focus their mind on the muscle experience greater muscle growth. Now that was without cannabis, right? So if cannabis kind of trains your mind to like think about that, that is potentially a performance enhancement, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's
in training, but it wouldn't be.
It's interesting, but not necessarily in competition.
Exactly.
Right? So yeah, I mean, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So that's how I in my fitness. That's how I use it. Is it helps me focus on whatever specific thing that I'm working on to really target that, and then it also helps me with the recovery process of after I'm done with the workout. I tend to feel less tired, and I'm also less quick to just exit the gym. I'm more likely to go, okay, let me go sit in the sauna. Let me do some follow-up stretching.
Yeah.
Let's think about this from the whole perspective. And as we know, having all that together, not even talking about the cannabis, but just doing the whole process of making sure you're stretching properly when you need to stretch, making sure you are allowing the body to recover and all those aspects.
Right. I mean, I think, you know, for some folks, you know, as I encounter people who are interested in improving their fitness, right, part of the reason they hire a coach is because they want the motivation. They want the accountability, right? They want to be reminded, they want to be shown how, they want to be shown when, right? And I think, you know, people that have a reluctance to exercise, I think a small amount of cannabis at the right time can kind of remind them that this is why I'm using this. And I feel energized, right? In the initial 10 minutes or so, and even, you know, into the whole experience, I feel energized. I'm reminded why I'm using this, right? the other stuff on my mind kind of fades out.
Yep. And I'm focused.
And I'm focused, and I'm going to go on a 6-mile run today, and part of that's going to be up a steep hill, right?
Yeah, normally you would be thinking about how difficult this run is, how steep this hill is, where now it's more of, I'm focusing on the experience that I'm having with this product.
So cannabis can be an aid to motivation, right? Even though the stoner stereotype that we've been, force-fed for the last 50 years would tell us exactly the opposite.
Yeah, they're gonna just be lazy, slovenous, gluttonous,
right? I know that that's not the case.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think a small amount of cannabis at the right time and the right amount, the right type, can really make the difference for somebody who's just reluctant to even start moving, right? To even get moving, right? I think the use of cannabis in that client, in that fitness person, can basically be like, this is the chronology of events that I'm going to do today. That's going to get me into the gym. That's going to get me exercising. That's going to get me to lift those weights. And it becomes a ritual, right? And it's a ritual of health.
Yep, a ritual, and then eventually that becomes a habit, and a habit becomes consistent, and then you see consistent results.
I think so.
Yeah. So one of the things I did want to ask you in regards to is, what would your recommendation on the delivery method, or how amateur athletes should be approaching it? We did talk a little bit about it, of small amounts at the right time. But what would your suggestions on, what do you give your clients on suggestions on how to determine that for themselves?
Well, I think, the people that I'm working with presently that that have experience with cannabis, they can already have an educated conversation about this, because they've tried edibles, they've tried vaping, they've tried, vaping flower, they've tried smoking flower out of a pipe, all these different things, right? For me, so I go back to where I start personally, right? I have kind of a compressed schedule. I want the effect to occur now. I want to know what's going to happen, and I want it to wear off soon.
Gotcha.
Right? So for me, that's not edibles, right?
Exactly.
That's
unless
vaporizing.
You're using the nanoparticle edibles that they're coming out with now that hit within less than about 30 seconds to a minute.
Really?
Of how the cannabis is basically encased in a protein that your body then recognizes and can break down quicker.
Okay, interesting.
Versus how it has been previously, which is combining enough fat.
We have to try this now. But but for me personally, just my experience with edibles and gummies is that it's like 70 to 90 minutes before I'm even feeling anything.
Usually.
So so I'm like, okay, so I can't really plan my day like that necessarily, but for some folks who are concerned about the lung impact of smoking, right? And I've done just directly smoking the flower, just like in a small pipe, or vaporizing flower just at different temperatures to try to hit the different terpenes. I've experimented with that a little bit. So really, I would really just want to have an educated conversation with a person about what's their current understanding of cannabis and where should they start.
Gotcha.
And I would say basically, let's start not in a fitness setting, right? Just try a couple of different things, right, in a safe space,
and see how your body
in
reacts.
your home. Is there a place in your home where you can lay out a mat and try to do some push-ups? Is there a place where you can lay out a mat and do some stretching? See how this informs your movement. Right?
Did it improve? Did you want to do more than you normally would? Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I did want to touch on, like I said, so there is the newest thing that's coming out with the faster acting edibles. Like I said, that's basically it's a nanoprotein that basically engulfs the THC. Your body recognizes it as a protein because your body recognizes proteins, and it can break it down faster to allow it to be absorbed into your bloodstream faster.
Interesting.
So that's something that they're coming out with recently. And then you talked about how your at this point preferred method is smoking the flower either through a pipe or whatever, and at different temperatures. So there is products out there. I'm not going to plug any particular brands because they're not paying me, but there are different particular pipes, bongs, vaping devices that have the ability to adjust the settings so that you can dial in the temperature to where you want it to combust the flower at cooler temperatures, which are more accepting and freeing to the lungs. Because for the science nerds out there, hot combustion coming into your lungs weren't made for that high level of temperatures.
Right.
It burns your alveoli, which is the smaller vessels that allow for oxygen exchange and all that. That does damage. So if you can provide that at cooler temperatures, so like those different vaping products, provide it at cooler temperatures, and then they do have these pipes that are infused with a liquid that can hold freezing temperatures for like 3 to 4 hours. So that when you light it up in that pipe, it goes through the chambers, and though that freezing liquid is wrapped around the chamber that is allowing for the
there's a heat
air
exchanger
exposure.
in there.
So it's drawing out the heat as the smoke is going through. That cold air is allowing the smoke then to be a lot cooler, hitting your lungs is a lot smoother, and you do get a lot more of those terpene profiles. Because for those
So
out
it's
there
fully
that
combusted and then cooled.
Yep, correct.
So all of
The smoke that you're getting.
all the different components are there,
Yep.
right? Because I mean, I think there are some folks that are trying vaporizers with flower that are like, I've got to hit this 3 times because I want this, because this terpene has a boiling point of 265.
Yep, I was about to bring that up. Yeah.
And this terpene has a boiling point of 315, right? And they kind of want to hit all of that, but it would be cool to have one device that basically kind of does that, cools it down before you bring it in.
Yep.
So yeah, that's cool.
And those are the things
really
that I would definitely recommend for those starting out, and even those that are more experienced, because you want to protect your lungs, you want to protect your body, because that's the point of this topic. One is sports athletes, even amateur or professional, they care about their bodies. You're not doing all that training for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, I was a 10-year heavy smoker, when I was in my 20s and into my 30s. And, I mean, it was doing horrible damage to my body, and I was fortunate to be able to quit smoking entirely, right? And I didn't take any smoke into my body for many years.
Allow your body to recover.
So, and then I became a distance athlete, and I started running half marathons and, distance races and stuff, and actually performing pretty well for my age, So I was like, okay. So, I mean, but I am like really concerned about my lungs, although I have no problem with them,
Me too. Yeah.
But let's keep it that way.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
the
let's
key.
just be really moderate in how we use cannabis, and let's be thoughtful about utilizing the technology that's available now, right?
Yeah. And that's where I see cannabis and sports going, is developing and modifying these methods so that it can be as beneficial for the body, but still have those benefits for the mind as well.
Someday will use of cannabis in an athletic space be as common as, like Bengay?
Yeah, I was about to say,
right?
yeah.
Like, mentholated rub, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was something, I was in sports in high school and college. And, on the bus to the meet or whatever, to the event, to the game, there's people putting on Vapo Rub and all kinds of stuff, right? Atomic Balm was one of the brands. It was like super hot. It was like, and
Tiger Balm.
and people were not necessarily even using it properly.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, it's like a mental game.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it was weird. But, so it's like, will someday the use of cannabis be that mainstream that, we know how it's used, we know how it's beneficial, that's how we use it, and, and we get on with it,
Yeah. I think that's going to be the key, and I think that's going to, and going back to the benefits of it, I think one of the biggest benefits, and we've touched on this throughout the episode, is really, I would say if there is a competitive advantage, it's decreasing stress and recovery.
Sure, right. Why should that be considered illegal?
And that is the key. I agree. Why should that be considered illegal? Because cannabis has more benefits than we currently know, and we don't know a lot about it because of the research in comparison to alcohol. Right. So
totally.
Athletes can use alcohol all day, any day, and it's not banned. They can get tested, and it will impact them professionally, especially in a competitive situation.
It'll probably be detrimental.
Exactly.
Right. So, I mean, if you look at, like Tour de France and all of the,
those long endurance cyclings.
But like all of the controversy around blood doping.
Oh, yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, I watched a documentary recently about this, and it was basically, you know, at the beginning of the documentary, there's Lance Armstrong basically saying, "I've never used anything," you know, and then they kind of go through the story and they show like how this laboratory was exposed and how this guy self-medicated to like figure out how to beat it and to show that it could be beaten. And then after all that, you know, there's, you know, Lance Armstrong testifying again some years later, yes, I used all that stuff, right? So, I mean, you know, it's like everybody, you know, not everybody, but I mean, I think, you know, like the top 20 finishers or some, you know, high number, you know, the top finishers were all using this and finding a way to get around it, you know, and you know, it was like, it's unfortunate that they had to do that in order to compete, and I think, you know, there's been studies on those substances that prove that it does increase your VO2 max, it increases your endurance, it increases your muscular strength, all those things should be banned, right? You know. But the stuff that helps you recover, the stuff that is therapeutic,
Exactly.
why ban that?
Yeah, and that's
right?
and that goes back to the just the stigma of it. And that's really what's the driving force of why that is the case. I think as we continue to be more educated on it and realize there's no reason why they shouldn't be using this, because again, it's not giving them a competitive advantage. It's in actual competition.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully the future holds a lot better for potential of athletes on the breadth of what they can have use and help with their performances in, again, a regulated, discerning way.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, so I mean, we're still in a time and place where the stigma associated with cannabis is high.
Yeah.
Right?
Unfortunately.
I mean, you know, and I come into this basically kind of like trying to like put that out of my head because I'm using cannabis in an entirely legal way.
Yep.
And in an informed way.
Yep.
Right? And I'm trying to share my knowledge with people and learn from other people from their knowledge too. So, I mean, you know, there are some people that are just going to be like, oh, it's a bunch of stoners all going to the gym. Like,
druggies, it's like.
You know, I mean, and just like, so I just can't let that negative talk influence my future behavior. You know,
definitely.
it's like, I just can't, I'm done with that.
I mean, at this point, to me, it's like show and
you
tell.
have to be done with it.
Yeah, you're gonna show by your actions. I'm using it. I'm open about using it, and you see how productive I am. So I'm gonna defeat that stigma just with my actions, and I've done that over the years.
Yeah, sure.
They see how busy I am and how hard I work in comparison to those that don't. And I'm not saying that I'm better or any worse. It's showing that this particular plant is not having the deleterious effect that we've seemed to know for so long.
Yeah. So, I mean, that might be a good segue into like just the concept of how, you know, like trauma-informed coaching, right, is beneficial, and how cannabis can be brought into that space, right? Now, you know, because I think the stereotype that we're talking about, that we've both, you know, in our own minds and our own lives have just kind of put behind us, right? I think, you know, people that are experiencing trauma and post-traumatic stress, they have like negative self-talk, right? And we all have negative self-talk, right? But if you think about, you know, trauma relief as a way of like kind of getting to your best self, right? So that you can perform and do the things that you want to do in order to continue being your best self and be successful at whatever you do, right?
Not let it inhibit you. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of why I gravitated, you know, in the initial stages of this conversation and the emails that we had, you know, prior to today, you know, like why I really focused on the post-traumatic stress, you know, person, the client, because, you know, as people overcome their trauma and recognize how it manifests in their lives and is a barrier, they begin to like kind of compartmentalize that, and they can put it behind them, and they can begin to perform in the best possible way, and they can really, they can move that trauma out of the way. It ceases to be a barrier.
Yeah.
and they can accomplish things that they never thought possible because they're kind of stuck in this, oh, I'm a victim, oh, I'm angry about this, oh, I've been damaged by this, and just how different kinds of therapeutic inputs can really kind of move that stuff aside and help people really perform and just be their best selves.
Yeah,
right? So that's kind of like that trauma-informed approach, right?
And I would imagine that based on what you talked about in the very beginning of the episode of that you kind of got into the space because of service, of wanting to be a service to people. Sure. That this trauma-based approach that you're applying to fitness would be that it would brighten your heart of knowing that the purpose that you say you want to do of serving people, you seeing it in fruition, you're seeing it actually serving them in positive ways, and then flourishing after that. I would imagine that's very enlightening. It helps you continue to move forward.
Oh, I think so. I mean, if I think of just some of the philosophical principles that I've become familiar with, it's right thought, right action, right livelihood, right? So a service, a life of service is a right livelihood, right? You're trying to bring your knowledge and skill to people to improve their lives too, right? And I see that so prevalent in the cannabis industry today, right? And I don't see it in the soft drink industry, like Coca-Cola and McDonald's. They're not in a service. They'll say customer service, right? But really, is it true service? Are you trying to bring value and improve and make the world a better place? No,
versus
really
just
not.
Profitability, capitalism,
Right. So I'm just I'm kind of going through a career transition of my own where I basically have recently retired from a public service career, right? And and I'm like, okay, I still have a lot to bring, so how am I going to do that, So like 5-6 years ago, I was in the gym and I was having a particularly bad day at work and I was dissatisfied with my job and all kinds of bad politics and stuff. And I was like, wow, the 1 hour I spend in the gym is the best hour of my day, right? Yeah. And that was before PTSD diagnosis. That was before the use of cannabis for me in a fitness setting, right? I just knew that fitness was the thing that made the difference for me. Yeah. It grounds me, it improves my mood, it improves my state of mind. And I'm like, wow, how can I bring that forward to other people after I finish this aspect of my career in public service? So, I mean, it was like, 2016, 2017, I was like, I'm going to become a personal trainer, right? And a fitness coach, to me, that's, as I move forward in that, that's what I'm going to do.
That's awesome.
I'm not going to quit. Yeah. And there's a lot of barriers to it, right?
There is. It's not easy, but it's worth it though.
Marketing and just getting in front of the right client, identifying the right client is a huge aspect of it, right? Who am I really trying to serve? Yeah. And how do I really reach those? And, it's an exciting journey, that's awesome. And I'm so glad that we met and that, that you would invite me to your podcast. I mean, I really come in with gratitude and I really understand kind of, the difference in our personal backgrounds based on factors that we can't control, right? And how, so I really am grateful to be in this space with you, and I really want to bring my knowledge, and I want to learn too.
And I appreciate it, and that's how it comes off. I definitely appreciate that, and I'm grateful as well for you to come on the podcast and share your knowledge and share your experiences, because I know, at least I believe that there's going to be viewers out there that have similar experiences to you, and that might not have thought about cannabis as a potential way of helping it. And even if it's not cannabis, it might be exercising.
True.
Because I've had the same experience. When my mother passed, I was in a state of depression, and I noticed the same thing, that the benefits that I got from cannabis use of being less de-stressed, being able to sleep better, letting certain things go that I felt like I couldn't let go. I was getting those same benefits working out. When I left the gym, I felt the same way. Left the gym, I was like, I feel good. I feel happy. I feel free. Even though I'm tired from working out, I still feel better than I did before I went into the gym.
Right. So, I'm not a brain chemist, okay? I'm not a biochemist, okay? But my background in public health kind of teaches me how to review the literature and how to see trends in literature and how to tell whether a piece of literature, like whether a study is a quality study or not. Right? So one of the things that I've looked at is, like endogenous cannabinoids, right? We have the endocannabinoid system, right? Well, one of the body's, one of the chemicals that the body produces naturally that produces the effect we call runner's high, right, is itself an endocannabinoid, and it's called anandamide. And I just learned of this recently. Now, people that are in brain science and all this stuff, they've known about this for a long time. But that's just something that I found out about. So it's like, if you think about cannabis as a supplement, right? Now, in my background as a fitness coach, I'm not trained to recommend supplements to people, right? I can talk about nutrition generally. I can help people improve their nutritional routine generally, but I can't say you need vitamin D. I can't say you need more protein necessarily, although we can look at data and go, gosh, you're only getting, like, only 10% of your diet is protein. It should be 35 if you're trying to build muscle. That's known, right? But what I'm saying is, like, cannabinoids that occur in the plant can be used as a supplement to the cannabinoids that your body is already producing, endogenously, right? Anandamide is the one that I know as a runner. Sometimes, when I'm at the gym and I'm running hard on a treadmill, and I get off that treadmill, I have joked around with people I know at the gym, hey man, I'm not responsible for my actions for the next 10 minutes, It's like, I love myself, I love everybody, I just, like, without cannabis at all, that runner's high in me, I get a very strong reaction.
Your endorphins are flowing.
Right? And that's from a very intense workout, right? What if I'm not going to work out that intensely? Because I am the age I am, and I have the ailments and, like, the aches
but anybody
and pains.
shouldn't be working that intensely for, let's say, every single day for a year.
Right.
Like, we have to have those parameters, but
knowing that cannabis can be used supplementally to our,
to stimulate that kind of feeling that you want.
To our brain chemistry, to our body chemistry. People use supplements of all kinds with very little research.
Very little research. And
they look at an advertisement and they
regulations on supplements, like the FDA does not have to approve supplements.
So that's just another reason why I don't use a lot of supplements. I supplement protein because a man my age needs to maintain muscle. And the way we do that is by working out with weights and by making sure we have sufficient protein. So I take a protein supplement periodically, right? But that's for me, right? I don't recommend that for other people, but I can help people think critically about it. See, that's really why people hire a coach, right? They want somebody to help them critically think through, what exercises do I need to be doing? Do I need supplements? Yes or no, right? What does my diet look like? What is the type of day I'm going to exercise, right? So that's, like, where an effective coach comes in. It's like to help people kind of just meet a person where they're at in all these different stages and go, okay, let's try this, let's try that, right? For some clients, they just don't want to use cannabis at all. They can't.
And that's okay.
They have to undergo a drug test at work or whatever. Their family wouldn't like it, or they themselves don't have that experience that they wouldn't like. So, they don't have to. But
I believe that cannabis can be used by everyone, but I don't think that everyone has to use it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, and I think some people still have to overcome their own stigmatizing, and self-stigmatizing thoughts about, oh my God, if I use this, then I'm a drug addict, right? Which is unfortunate. People do think that way.
So I think we've went through a lot today. I wish
we've covered a lot.
We have covered a lot. Good. I'm going to have you come back so we can have more great topics like this, and maybe have a part 2 on cannabis and sports, because I know there's a lot of things that we had on the docket that we quite didn't get to because of how detailed this conversation was. But we can definitely have you come back on the show and get into some of those topics. But there's 2 questions that I ask every person that comes on the podcast that I definitely want to get into before we get out of here is, if you were a cultivar or a strain, for those, everybody knows I like to use cultivar because that's the more scientific based on for us growers. But if you were a cultivar, what would that cultivar be?
Yeah.
It could be made up or one that you experienced. And what would the effects be?
That's a fun question. Hawaiian Vacation.
Okay.
Okay, it's an actual strain that I've encountered here in Albuquerque, and I can't find it anymore. Right? But I gravitate to that because it's really the first strain that I used in a fitness space. I found it not to be too cerebrally energizing, but more physically energizing, right? It gave me good mind-body connection. It gave me a good sense of energy and motivation, right?
Gotcha.
But also mental relaxation and not like overactive, mental thoughts, right? So for me, it really hit a good balance, and it was mild, 16, 17% THC. So that's one that, I would be.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense.
But also I like a strain that's got like a balance between THC and CBD too, right? And there's been a few that I found here that I can't find now. The first one was called B4.
Okay. I've had that one before.
I really like that, and I really liked Sweet Baby May.
I never had that one.
Which was kind of a similar thing to B4 in
Okay.
that it was like 12% THC and like 10% CBD.
Okay, almost a one-to-one.
Yeah, almost a one-to-one. And I remember having a conversation with a bud tender at one outlet, which was basically saying that it's just really hard to grow that kind of a strain that's got that balance of THC and CBD. And I don't know enough about it to know like how you grow that or something, but it is something that I would look for.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard to grow. I would say if that, again, I don't know that particular strain, so there are strains that are finicky that can be difficult to grow. I would say the probably reason why they don't grow it as often is because the market, right now the New Mexico market and any new market, the push or what is the driving factor behind sales is THC potency.
Yeah, and that's a drawback.
Yeah.
That's kind of a drawback, I think, for the use in the fitness space, I think, because people, well, I mean, I don't know about others, but I know my experience, like when I have a THC concentration that's above 20, it's not really what I want to use for exercise.
Gotcha. See, for me, the percentage really doesn't have an impact on me because I've had experiences with, let's say, Forbidden Fruit, which is a strong strain that was really, it depends on the grower. It can be strong, it can be weak. Again, all of it is relative on how it's grown. But if it's grown well, it can be a high potency, above 20% or something like that. But for me, I've had a Gorilla Glue that was at 14 to 12%. And it had a stronger effect than that 25% of that Forbidden Fruit because the entourage effect, the terpenes that are involved in it, that's really how I guide people on determining strains is really that terpene profile and how it's all combined. So that would be my guess on that. But those are really great strains. Everybody out there, if you can find it, let us know so that we can pass it along to George over here so he can get him some more. And so the last question I want to just add to kind of wrap this up is, what does free the plant, free the people mean to you?
Well, I think we've touched on it a little bit, but really I think what it means is recognizing that we're entering into a new era where the legality of this is clear and, the stigma is being reduced so that we can, free the plant, free the people. Really, let's remember the intergenerational, sacred use of this plant, right? And how people have really cultivated the medicinal properties for a long, long time, right? And how that, so it's like, so when you free the plant, you free the people that are using the plant to even become better at it, right? And you see that happening in the marketplace already. It's fast. It's very exciting. But I mean, it really means like, let's recognize the past. And let's move into the future, just hopefully, and just knowing that we're doing the right thing.
No, I definitely appreciate it, and that is that's the first time we've had somebody take that approach on free the plant, free the people, and I really like that. I like that answer a lot, and I think it serves very well to what this podcast is about. We do want to pass on that knowledge. We want to gain more knowledge and pass that on as well, and improve. The whole thing is just that we want to be better every day. We want to improve every day, and we want to find different ways to do that. And that, as research comes along, some of the things that we thought were facts are going to change.
Oh, totally. Yep.
Especially with how young this plant is.
Yep.
So I want to say thank you again for coming onto the show. Please let the people know where they can find you if they're interested in having you as a fitness coach, if they wanted to get some, be one of your clients, how could they reach you,
Right.
Things of that nature.
Okay, so I hope by the time this launches, my website will be up, and it's Effective and Functional LLC.
Okay, wow.
Okay, so so the name of my company is Effective and Functional. It's one word.
Gotcha.
And you can find me on Facebook just with my name, George Schroeder.
Gotcha.
And you'll see a picture of me there, in my profile. And everything on my Facebook page is about fitness.
Gotcha.
And so I'll be pretty easy to recognize. And all of my posts are public. So
Awesome, awesome. So definitely follow George. Go to his website when that gets up. Go follow him on Facebook, and definitely contact him if you are interested in fitness as well as nutrition. And as he said, he's really focusing on trauma-based. What was the phrase that you put? You had it
trauma-informed fitness coaching.
Trauma-informed fitness coaching. I think that language is perfect because it's really hits it right on the head. You don't have any misguidings on what that means. So definitely go follow George. Like I said, he's a master of public health, so he has that real science-based knowledge, and we know this podcast is really based in science. I say it all the time. I'm a scientist at heart, and so that's how I approach my growing process, and really that's how I approach life, just because it's been ingrained in me through my whole life and college specifically.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I want to say thank you again. I appreciate you, George, for coming on and giving this information. Definitely follow Free the Plant, Free the People. Again, you know this was produced or presented by BluRok Farms. Definitely check out BluRok Farms. And if you do want to get a cannabis card, definitely go to leafwell.com and enter the code BluRokFarm10 to get $10 off your cannabis card renewal or new application process. So again, I definitely appreciate everybody for coming in. And like I said, definitely go follow George, and we're out.
Okay, thanks.